Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. While we don't have any earth-shattering news in the last week, we do have a couple of interesting tidbits that CCP gave us when it comes to their plans for EVE Online. First of all, we have weather effects that they're planning to bring later this month to 0.0 mostly. It's an interesting system where you basically have a sort of a storm that roams through the gate network. We'll always have a central system that potentially has some interesting PvE added to that, some unique sites when it comes to these storms, and then the effects basically take over systems around you that has like a lower values, but could also end up into low sec and into high sec. Dital is right next to 0.0, so it could be very interesting. All of these will have effects that are basically inspired by the 4 types in the Abyss, and there's some interesting stuff in there, like no cloaking, scram, and I think disruption range increase that could get crazy on some ships, and then one that's basically based on shields and one that's good for armor, but with their unique weaknesses, I think in resist or something like that. There's a full list, of course, on the website. Definitely go and take a look. All of this to me feels like CCP is continuing their efforts to bring more change into the game that basically tries to get rid of stalemates and of just hunkering down and some of the passivity that we end up with if the game is just too stable in general. And I think the next one that they'll be working on at the moment is going to be a similar thing with resources, so that we'll have a bit of depletion and that you'll basically, force or try to get a little bit more of a moving pattern in the game with potentially more conflict. Of course, all of these I think are aimed mostly at becoming conflict drivers. It could be very interesting. Next to that, they also announced a couple more proving grounds. If I'm not mistaken, there's one with the rookie ships that comes out of left field for me personally. That doesn't even feel like something I would want to take part in. I don't see the point of going in there in a rookie ship and then an empty clone, and feels a little bit too much like a waste of time for me. I don't want to spend hundreds of millions or billions on a proving ground ship, but a rookie ship is free, so don't really see the point in that. Then we have a battle cruiser one, and then we have a Caldari themed one that could be interesting. 2 versus 2 if I'm not mistaken. That's going to mix and match some different ship types potentially. So we'll have some sort of like frigates, interceptors and destroyers, Tech 1 destroyers if I'm not mistaken as well. That could be very interesting. I feel like this is more experimentation from CCP at the moment. They're trying different things to see what sticks, to see what's popular, so that eventually they can fine-tune the proving grounds, perhaps make some of these types like just available all the time. It all depends, I think, on the metrics, and it's interesting. It's not all for me, but it's definitely pretty interesting to see CCP continuing on these proving grounds and seeing what's going to happen next. Potentially, of course, also very interesting for industrials and traders. So let's also take a quick look at the New Eden store, see what's happening there. There should still be some more sales going on. Yes, there are, and this time we've got some more Vital Shift skins that are on sale. Love that on the Charon. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is like an animated skin, because those red lines should, they'll light up, and sometimes it like moves along a little bit. It's pretty cool. This is a very nice skin. There's some Gila skins, including Abyssal Darkfield skin that is on sale at the moment. And then we've got some Inner Zone. Oh, nice. That's been a long time since I've seen that front and center. But these are definitely like older skins that are really cool, very unique in their color palette, and something that a lot of players, I think, jumped on early on. So if you don't have some of these, it could be very, very interesting. Oasis of Fate skin as well. Zenitra Metametaria Exotica skin is on sale. You know, it's a little bit of everything. I think if you're looking for some cool skins, you can definitely find some in these sales. Even some of these bundles, like the Fleet Commander bundle for the command ships, is up for sale as well. Interesting how this evolves. Again, if you like these, you can definitely keep an eye on the New Eden store. And we are going to move on to the market. And as always, we'll start with some plex and stuff coming in at 510. All right, let's get started. Here is the plex market in Jita. Sellers below 2.6 million, buyers just below 2.5 million as well. And if we go to the player owned trade hub, we are still just below 2.6 million. So I'm seeing another bottom formation, first another sign of stability. Average price on the chart is right on 2.5 million. And from time to time we have daily averages like right now that want to get a little bit above that. But for now, this is just the state of plex at conceivably a relatively affordable price point at this time, 2.5 million. And I'm still reading this as it's summertime. So despite the fact that the real life situations, which I'm sure all of you know about, with lots of people that have to stay at home, could be a big boon for gaming. In general, this is still summertime and people are trying to do other things when they can. Here in Belgium, for instance, we're in the middle of a heat wave, so there's not that much gaming to be done anyways. I know you guys say 36 degrees, that's nothing where I live, but here in Belgium, we're really not used to that. We don't have air conditioning, most of us, and so it's not exactly conducive to intense gaming or anything like that. And I think in general, summertime's always a little bit of a slow burner in EVE Online, and this one in the end will not be that different. I'm really waiting for mid-September, something like that, where potentially we could see some moves and a trend starting in plex. For now, it's very clear, 2.5 million bottom 1 year price, and that's where we're at. For the multiple pilot train certificates, we have a similar chart, although that one started to show a little bit of sign of recovery, back from 1.25 billion to 1.3 billion, basically bringing it in line with 30 days of plex. And what we see at the tail end, I feel is very interesting. A little bit more pressure building, that 5-day moving average wanting to go back down. The price definitely not willing to go above 1.3 billion, and at the moment it is sellers coming in below 1.3 billion, buyers are coming in, I should really do it like this, at 1.25 billion. So just some more sell pressure here that has narrowed the margin between sellers and buyers, but that is also driving the average price back down away from the 1.3 billion range. So still pretty cheap as well. For the skill extractors, we're seeing that very same pattern, just with plex of course, because they have that super strong correlation when you can basically create skill extractors using plex as well normally. So this is also very clearly start the year at 400 million ISK. We are settling well below 300 million ISK. Sometimes we want to go up a little bit, but in general we're just not moving from this range. 293 million for the sellers, 285 for the buyers. Also a pretty narrow margin, which for me is a sign that we are in a bottom situation. And again, I think that the end of the summer will be the end of the stalemate, and that's where we'll see a real trend. Now it could still be that CCP then introduces like more resource scarcity by making those change over time as well, and that could be another downer for all of these goods, especially plex. But it could also be the exact opposite. CCP announces something really cool, we get a bit of hype, a bit more comeback, and then we could see a lot more demand all of a sudden for plex as well. So it's gonna be interesting to see how all of this evolves. For the skill injectors next, we are continuing our downtrend, and this is definitely against my own expectation, although CCP is still being very generous when it comes to giving us SP just to log into the game and things like that. So as a result, this is not entirely unexpected. I would say that this is building on your potential for the speculative part of these skill injectors, because I feel like if at some point CCP does come out with more Triglavian ships, for instance. I think at some point you can expect full ship lines with carriers and everything. Maybe the same thing for Eden.com. We could get like a step up in the war as well before we come to a resolution. That could mean more ships, more skill books, more demand for skill points. And here I can't say that this is plex that's driving the plex part that's driving the price down. That one is normally bottomed out already. So as a result, we've gone straight through that 700 million mark. We're now at 679 million ISK for the sellers and 652 almost for the buyers. So that is definitely a much wider margin that has opened up here, showing that there's even more pressure to go down. And once you break that range, of course, the market looks for a new place to settle. And at the moment, it could go all the way down towards 650 million or something like that if this has any more momentum. I have bought a large and a small skill injector, and I was too early. That's also part of the game, of course. After that, we get the small skill injector that does the same thing and wants to settle at 140 million, but you can see last couple of days we actually have traded below that on average, and yep, sellers are sort of giving up. 138 million for the sellers now, 126.7 for the buyers. Again, pretty healthy margin between these two, and sellers coming with some numbers, 30, 15, 29 here, just going. We're not going to stick to that 140 million, we're just going to go below that. So here we're set for another step down in small skill injectors as well. I was not expecting that. I thought when plex would bottom out that we would bottom out in the injectors as well, but nope, it's just not happening. Still too much supply for the market at the moment. Kind of crazy. Then we have our daily alpha injectors, which is the only one that, you know, if you would have bought last month or in May especially, you would be looking at some profits, because it made its way back to 40 million ISK on the chart. It's almost just below that, 40 million for the sellers and then 35 million for the buyers, showing that this is a different market segment, a different good to the other skill injectors entirely, because it is tied to these alpha players, of course, and so it has a different market dynamic. It really does its own thing. It's got a nice comeback in the last couple of months, whereas these other skill injectors, well, they're still going down to new one-year lows at this point. Started the year at 150 million. The high point was almost 900 million ISK for a large skill injector, and now buyers are getting back to a 650 million range. That's a loss of almost a third. That's quite significant actually. And finally, we also have the hypercores that are flat at their current range of around 280,000 ISK, 275,000 for a couple of sellers, 280 very quickly, and then 226,000 for the buyers. And this is a niche market. I think any real movements here are going to be CCP trying to do a sale or something like that for the Hypernet relay, or for some reason, some increased activity. So I'm still going to keep it here as a bit of a gauge as to what's happening with the Hypernet relay, something that, I like the fact that it is possible to just completely ignore it and still play EVE Online. And that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. So that's why the hypercores are still here. Next up, we've got the minerals coming in at 13 minutes. And let's take a look at these. Here is the titanium chart that did this nice little jump back up from 7 ISK on some volumes as well, although it has settled down quite quickly, and at the tail end, nothing goes up forever. We're already starting to pull back down. Now last week it was at the extreme situation. Basically, when I made my EVE talk, we were at 8.2 ISK for the sellers, and if we go back down to GTAS station, we're at 762 now for the sellers, and buyers are just above 7 ISK, which is still a pretty great price. And you can see in the Tranquility Refinery there's some more sellers coming in as well, 7.5, 7.3 even, although those numbers are pretty small in volumes. It's showing that supplies are quite healthy, but demand is still above 7 ISK as well, so showing that consumption and the need for ships has definitely increased now that 0.0 is at war. I still see lots of propaganda, fights, clips and things like that, so this is still very good news, of course, for titanium at the moment. And let's be honest, 7.6 is still pretty damn great. After that, we have the pyrite chart that is continuing to go back down. So not really, well, volumes are going down just a little bit, and we're touching 6 ISK on a couple of days for the average price, 620 for the sellers and 585 for the buyers. And I think what's still happening, I mean, I could be wrong on that, but look at that, 700 million units, 200 million units, 200 million units. There's just people that still have massive stocks of pyrite out there that are dumping them on the market at the moment. I don't think that this is just part of the regular available supply that's out there at the moment. This is just more old stocks that still need to go through the system before pyrite basically finds its price based on current consumption and current production. After that, we have Mixalon that did go up to 100 ISK about a month ago. That was a very, very expensive and incredible opportunity. It's normal that you have a pullback from that, but we're still in a really, really great place for sellers. In fact, we're still at almost 99 ISK for the sellers. It's the buyers that are at 84.34. I mean, that's a decently large margin, you could say, but considering where we're at price-wise, this is really very, very good, and it still shows that if you have the option to focus on Mixalon in mining, you definitely should do so. For the Isogen chart, we had a bit of stalling last week, and it's still the same. We're just below 25 ISK on average. Volumes are going down as well, and we're talking 24.28 for the sellers and 22.82 for the buyers. So pretty decently narrow margin between sellers and buyers here, just below 25 ISK. And what I'm still seeing is the same story as with pyrite. Why is Isogen not making real high points and just trying to defend the margin that it had on the start of the year? It is because there are still massive stocks available. 100 million here, 150 million twice down here, another 100 million units. We're gonna take a quick look at Tritanium. You've got the 1.1 billion units here, but then 70 million, 27 million, 56 million. It's kind of not normal that you get more Isogen in the volumes than for Tritanium cell order. So this to me still feels like we're still going through the stocks that have been available and been made available through the resource bonanza. All of that Rorcal mining, those endless respawning anomalies that were just chained again and again and again. They were massively overproducing Isogen, were massively overproducing pyrite, and it's gonna take a decently long time before all of that has been gone through in the cycle of creation and destruction in EVE Online. After that, we get Noxium that was actually doing really well last week, and after a bit of a recovery from 600 ISK back down to less than 500, we're actually going back up again. 525 ISK for the sellers, more than 500 ISK for the buyers as well. Very nice comeback from this 1 year chart, almost double the price, and here it does feel to me like it's a little bit different. Sure, you still have 10 million units here, but look at the numbers, 1 million, 3 million. That feels much more in line with what people can produce at the moment, what they're willing to bring to the market. And then we have this this higher price, much larger margin than Isogen and pyrite, but also volumes that make a lot more sense for the mineral, and as a result, very good times, of course, for people that mine Noxium. So that's still the situation with these high-SiC minerals, Isogen and pyrite. My read on that is there's still just old reserves available out there that are keeping it from gaining just like the others. Then we get our former null-SiC minerals, maybe back to null-SiC minerals, you could say, because I'm not sure if you can still mine it from, yeah, you can actually still mine it from high-SiC through these Edencom mining sites, but it's definitely not as ubiquitous as during the moon mining bonanza. And Zydrine, the big winner of the null-SiC minerals, starts here at 500 ISK, and we're still well above 1000 ISK, double the price at the moment. 1170 for the sellers and 1050 ISK for the buyers. So you're definitely getting rid of your Zydrine for double what you could earlier this year. This is showing that Yeah, Zydrine not overly available either, and this feels normal if you want to revalue mining activity in EVE Online. That Zydrine, which comes from more risky places, especially if you want big volumes there, you need to take some risks, and it should go for a good price. And this is, historically speaking, I think actually a really good price for Zydrine as well. And then we have the one that is still really stumping me in its behavior. Here is Megasite. Starts at 400 ISK, but very quickly went to 500, and we're right back here as well. I don't have a good explanation for this. Megasite in volumes should even be more difficult to get than Zydrine, and yet Zydrine more than double the price. Megasite basically up just a little bit on the year, practically flat. That's something that I can't really explain. In fact, sellers are now coming in at 493, below 500 ISK, 444 for the buyers. There's still a wide margin here as well. It's just, I'm gonna say that there's just not enough need for it in the current industrial meta, and as a result it's not able to gain together with Zydrine, but it also potentially still means an opportunity if you think that it's also tied to volumes, reserves and things like that, and that this could still shoot up, which I personally am expecting for Isogen and Pyrite to eventually start to make gains once we do get through all of those extra reserves. But for Megasite, something that has always been a lot harder to get through, the bonanza of moon mining was not that long in time-wise compared to just generally being able to get infinite amount of Isogen and Pyrite. And so I don't have a good explanation for this. It's not something I would personally gamble on, seeing Megasite overtake Zydrine, which historically it always has been more expensive than Zydrine. So it's a crazy situation. I don't have a good explanation for it, unfortunately. After that, we still have Morphite. That's basically flat for the week and doing really well. 14,330 ISK for the first seller, 13,500 for the buyers. Again, a bit of a margin opening up, but keep in mind, for me, Morphite purchasing options are below 10,000 ISK, so we're still at a pretty massive premium. It is tied to the Tech 2 economy, and as a result, Tech 2 ships, there's probably a lot of demand for those in the current war. Next up, let's move on to PI at 2135. Let's see if there's anything we can spot here. Last week, I basically felt like everything except for what was tied to fuels was trying to make a little bit of a comeback. Let's see if that's what's happening. Here is the broadcast notes. Unfortunately, on the 5-day moving average, you can see that we've already basically lost half the gains we made about 2 weeks before that. We're back down to less than 2 million for the sellers and 1.75 million for the buyers, showing a lack of demand. We're trading below average, not yet at the 1-year low point, but the pressure is basically still here. Construction blocks did really well to get back above 10,000 ISK, and now this week, unfortunately, again 5-day moving average giving back almost, well, this one is probably going to be a third to a quarter of the previous gains, but sellers starting to get a bit more aggressive. 10,760 for most, 10,000, less than 10,000 here, and buyers are still just at 9,000 ISK, showing that the lack of demand is still a bit of a problem. We're not overly supplied anymore like we were during the real bottom prices, but the pressure definitely still exists and we're still well below average. Consumer electronics, yeah, to my surprise, showing, well, not exactly to my surprise. I thought we'd be able to sustain it a little bit better, but it is summertime yet again, and that is not when there's huge demand or anything like that in PI, I don't think. And as a result, consumer electronics did really well to get back to 12,000 ISK on average, but look at that fallback in 2 steps. We're back down to 10,000 ISK, which is well below average. 10,780 for the sellers and less than 10,000 ISK for the buyers, which is, if you look at this chart here, buying for less than 10,000 ISK, if we disregard this one little period here, is actually a pretty nice place to step into. Does feel very risky considering the full 1-year chart here, but historically speaking, consumer electronics below 10,000 ISK is really cheap. Fuels were suffering last week and are just continuing to confirm that. We are still hovering at that 1-year low point of around 9,000 ISK, 9,000 for the sellers, 8,600 for the buyers. Look at our average for the year, well above 11,000, so this is definitely not doing well. Cryoprotectant Solutions is doing what I expected it would start to do last week. I'm still thinking that a premium price at some point will materialize, but it requires CCP to come at us with even more implants, and patience does eventually run out in the market. And so we get this this slow going down of the price back towards 100,000 disc, and we're basically back at a normal price. A little bit above that, 108,000 for the sellers, 100,000 basically for the buyers. This is Cryoprotectant Solutions from about a year ago. Enriched uranium, tied to fuels, showing again that bottom price range, 10,000 disc, a little bit below that probably for the buyers, 10,200 for the sellers, 9,900 for the buyers. So on the advanced PI materials tied to structures last week, we did have like a bit of a comeback in almost all of them, but coming from 1 year low points. And here integrity response drones, although it's not as severe as the pullback in broadcast nodes, it's definitely there. And so we have basically we're losing some of those gains. 1.9 million for the sellers, 1.7 million for the buyers. Yeah, it's not the 1 year low point, but it is clearly well below average. Mechanical parts was above 10,000 disc and is trying to get back, but is really struggling to do so. Well, sellers 10,700, buyers 9,750. I think buyers are forced up a little bit, so that is interesting. But again, if you look at this full 1 year chart, it's not the best possible price by a long shot. Next up here, we've got our nanites, also still struggling. Considering where we started off last year, it's still doing okay, but if we then add this to the average price, it's really not doing that well. 6,000 disc for the sellers, 5,600 for the buyers, also pretty damn cheap in general. Nano factories, same thing again, right? Bit of a bump. We're already losing those gains. I'm not going to go through all of these exact price ranges at this point. I want to gain a little bit of time because of the heat. Here's organic mortar applicators, flat around 800,000 disc on the chart, 815,000 for the sellers, 786, so that's basically 800,000 is right in the middle. So you're able to buy these below 800,000 disc. Starts the year at 1.2 million. Regular price is definitely above a million, so there's potential here. When will that materialize? That is of course the real question. Recursive computer model had a little bit of a more impressive comeback, went above 1.5 million, and sellers are still above that, buyers just below 1.5 million. So there's maybe one exception that's able to maintain its gains a little bit better than all the rest so far. It would be recursive computing module. We'll see next week if it manages to maintain that. And then we've got the robotics, which about a month ago had a nice little comeback back to 95,000 on a couple of days. Normal price though, 100,000 disc for robotics, so this was still not that great. And then unfortunately pressure on fuel related PI materials is just too much, and we're back very close to 1 year low point. 84 to 85,000 for the sellers, 82,000 for the buyers. Very, very cheap at the moment. Self-harmonizing power cores actually also stabilized at its gains, which is nice, but let's keep in mind this is also one of those PI materials that normally costs more than 2 million ISK, had a step down to 175, looked like a bottom, went down to 1.5, looked like a bottom, and then actually on a couple of days it broke 1.5 and has been struggling ever since. So this comeback, it may just be a little bit more of a slow burn because we were at really crazy prices. We're at less than 1.7 million for the sellers, a bit above 1.6 million, normally 2 million and up. This is definitely still well below average. Sterile conduits also ending its rebound basically at 1.1 million. Yeah, investors are taking advantage of these low prices, but they are, careful enough that it stops before anything too major happens. Yukami superconductors also slowly settling back down. We're talking 75,000 for the sellers and 66,000 for the buyers. And finally, we've got the wetware mainframes that exactly 1 year low points. Investors pick it all up to 1.75 million, which is still well below average for wetware mainframes. And then supply that is still more than demand starts to take over, and we have to lose those gains, less than 1.7 million for those sellers, and buyers 1.5 million, which is really cheap for wetware mainframes. So that's the PI market, unfortunately. A little bit of a bounce, but it is still summertime, and I think we're still suffering too low demand for that for any real comebacks back to the average ranges. I'm still trying to slowly take advantage of 1 year low points to slowly buy up some PI that I'll hopefully be able to sell for better prices later. Next up, the advanced wool materials, 29.25. Let's take a look at these. I'll think I'm not expecting anything too major, because what I'm not really hearing is like too much infrastructure going down in 0.0. Perhaps, I mean, there's definitely lots of regions that are burning, but I think that it's like the key regions of the Imperium are still not, I think, being taken down completely, and so I'm not expecting anything really earth-shattering in the advanced wool materials. So my view on this is more look for those 1 year low points, try to make some small investments, and other than that, also try to sell at the right time, but I'm not seeing any reasons to expect major trends right now. So crystalline carbonites was at a 1 year low point last week, and look at that, as the volumes dip and dip, we get to that low point, and then of course investors come in, but just like with PI, they're very careful. We're now talking 132 ISK for the sellers, 124 for the buyers. Still very cheap, just a little bit away from the bottom. Fermionic condensates is actually doing decently well, going back to 90,000 ISK. So here, if you bought this 1 year low point of well below 80,000 ISK, I'm not sure what the buyers were at that point, but it should be pretty good. We're now talking 90,000 ISK, which is definitely the high range for the chart. 85,000 for one seller, 90,000 for most, 80,000 for the buyers. It's a wide margin. It's not going to be easy to get your sale, but you could give it a try, of course. Fernite carbide had this big boom right at the start of the war, and is now maybe overshooting a little bit, because I'm seeing daily average prices close to 120. We're talking 129 for the sellers, 111 for the buyers. Yeah, you could definitely try to grab some very cheap Fernite carbide right now. This is something that happens from time to time, and I basically feel like it's happening right here. Fernite carbide goes up to the moon, 200 ISK, because hype, everyone wants munins, we need that production, we need all of those resources, and then it crashes back down, and there's just too much supply all of a sudden, too many players trying to take advantage of these high prices, and as a result we crash back down to 1 year low point, 111. That's down here for the buyers. That's definitely pretty cheap. Ferrogel basically going back down from 40k again, sellers coming in at 40,000, buyers at 36,000, opening up a little bit of a margin. Very difficult to actually be trading on this one, I think. Fullerites is continuing its agonizing path back down to 1,000 ISK, which is still an okay price for Fullerites. So it's actually an impressive performance over the last couple of months, well above its average, but it is now, it looks like it's basically dying, while it's actually basically going back to its average. Still above 1,000 ISK for the sellers, 983 for the buyers. Hypersynaptic fibers coming off of a slight bump up to 12.5 thousand ISK. Low point is less than 10,000 ISK, and we're basically in the middle, so that's not where I would make a move just yet. Nano transistors, same thing, 6,000 ISK, actually pretty reasonable price, but a bit of competition, a bit of supply is coming in, driving the price just below that, and the buyers, they're willing to stay well away from all of this, less than 5,000 ISK by quite a little bit. So this is basically, buyers are down here, sellers are up here. It's trying to find its way. Sellers are definitely making the price at the moment. Non-linear metamaterials coming down from another double spike up to 25,000 ISK. We're right in the middle of the bottom, 20 to 25k, so that's also a little bit too late to sell, too early to be considering a purchase. Phenolic composites, pretty much the same thing. Photonic metamaterials also coming back down a little bit. We're less than 50k on the last couple of days. 16,000 for the sellers, 13,600 for the buyers. That's definitely, again, not a lot of demand. You're buying below 14,000 ISK. Let's see if we can get that to show on the chart. You could consider it. It is definitely pretty cheap. And let's see if the same thing happened here with Minmatar. No, that's very interesting that we do have different behaviors in some of these materials. So we get the Ferrite carbide for these Minmatar ships diving down oversupplied 1-year low point, and then the plasmonic metamaterials, they say, oh, hold on, we're not gonna crash that hard, and we're actually staying well above 20k, 22,370 for the first seller, 21,760 also for the buyer, showing decent demand. Yeah, not doing the exact same thing as the carbide equivalent. Ceramic fibers, that's also, you know, a chart where it's very difficult to say you should sell or buy. Terahertz metamaterials going back down to less than 20,000 ISK. Well, let's see where the buyers are at here. 19,500, still a bit too early in my opinion to make a move. Then we have titanium carbide. That is also losing some of its gains. Low points 125, high point 175. We're at 168 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. Man, that's in the middle of everything. And tungsten carbide, that could be more interesting. We definitely have a drop off. Yesterday's or today's daily average looks like a 1-year low point. We are talking 169 for the sellers, 159 for the buyers. Let's see if we can get 160 to show on the chart. That's 162. This is also another one where you could try a buy order, because we have another pretty sharp drop off and daily averages starting to get close to those 1-year low points. So there are some buy opportunities in my opinion in the advanced wound mats. Not that much, as I've said, in the upwards pressure due to the war or anything like that just yet. Who knows if it keeps going though? We could start to see some real disruptions, but for now that's not the case. Next up, Tech 2 ships at 35.45. So for Tech 2 ships, let's do the same thing basically. Look for opportunities and try to spot the patterns. Here's the Basilisk going back down in price to a well below average, but bottom prices 180, 175 million is what we're looking at. Well, we're slowly starting to get there. 202 million for the sellers, 182.5 million for the first buyer. Still a bit too early in my personal book, but 182 is definitely below the entire chart already. So it's up to you to decide. If you think that we're bottoming out right now, then you could definitely try purchase for a Basilisk. And the potential, of course, we've got very nice high point, 250, 230 million, doable 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times over the last year. It shows that that potential definitely exists here. Next up, we've got the Cerberus, unfortunately flat above 230 million, right on its average. 232 for the sellers, 212 for the buyers. That's definitely a no for me. Then we've got the Guardian. That's interesting, starts to show prices below 200 million on its average. 184 million was my last purchase, 180.5 million for the buyers, 200 million for the sellers. Definitely also something you could, I think, try a buy order for. Then we have our stealth bombers that have made us quite a bit of ISK in our last trades. And here, you know, also keeping an eye on Reddit, and in these conflicts, stealth bombers are popular. They can hit well above their weight if they can bomb the right fleets, for instance, and as a result you do quite, and it's also a little bit more risky, right? Doing bombing runs is not always that easy. You sometimes end up bombing yourself, and as a result there's quite a bit more loss going on and potential in these spikes, which you can see happening right here. Went up to 35 million, low point here. I think I bought these for 21 million or something like that, close to this bottom. So there's definitely trades to be made here. Unfortunately, right now we basically have a bounce that started at 28 million at the bottom, back up to 32.5 million for the sellers. We're still at 27 million for the buyers. So this is too early to be moving back in. The Ikitursa is flat at 400 million ISK, so this is just one Triglavian Tech 2 ship to keep an eye on what's happening there. The Ishtar made its way back above 230 million, back in its normal range at the low end of that. So basically, maybe 3 weeks ago, we did touch that 200 million mark. We also have the investors showing up, buying those cheap Ishtars, so the volumes are there, but the gains are not super spectacular just yet. 232 million for the sellers, 215 million for the buyers. Then the Manticore, slightly shyer in its jump up, right? Went up to 30 million ISK and is already making its way back down as well. 29 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. That's still too early, unfortunately, as well. Notice how the Manticore was not as volatile as the Hound. Then we've got the Munin, and let's see if this is repeating what we saw in at least one of the advanced moon materials. Jumped up to 350 million ISK at the start of the war, and we are overshooting here as well. We're getting back to less than 200 million on the average price, 210 for the first seller, 220 million for most, 181 million for the buyers. Just like with the Basilisk and the Guardian, I think you could try a purchase for a few cheap Munins at this point, and then hope that the war keeps going, of course, and that at some point the Imperium feels forced to fill them again, lose them again, and that we do get another spike. It can happen. You just saw it last month. Then we've got the Nemesis, also went back up to 30 million ISK, is slowly going back down. I think you can purchase these for 20 million at the bottom range. We're still at less than 22 for the buyers. There's still 240 here, so with a little bit of patience, we could definitely get there again as well, but it's too early. Oneros is playing with the 1 year low points here, 172 million for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. I would not blame you for trying to snag one cheap Oneros. Keep one thing in mind though, volumes are not great. I would never trade with more than one Oneros at a time. It's going to be very difficult to actually get the sell-off. Then we've got the Panther, super stable right here, 1.2 billion for the sellers, a bit above 1 billion for the buyers. Why is the Panther here? I feel like this is also a bit of a gauge that we can use for those advanced moon materials. Right now, a bit above average, probably due to the war. We have some advanced moon materials that did go up in price during the war. It's also Minmatar, so it's trading a little bit above average, but it's definitely stabilizing at this point. It's not like the war is driving all prices through the roof, or that there's such destruction of production lines of the advanced materials that we're seeing this show through. Where would we see this first? I think in the largest ships that take the most of these resources, although its volumes are really terrible. I think here you would immediately see that people would still produce a few Panthers, but would immediately demand that higher price because of what they're currently forced to invest into the production cycle. And then we get the exact opposite. Here is a Purifier, small stealth bomber, nice spike up to almost 40 million ISK. So this wave is another one that I did manage to make a trade on. And then right now we're recovering, but what's the bottom price for a Purifier? Probably 22 million or something like that as well for the buyers. We're still at 25 million, 28 million for the sellers, so still a little bit too early here as well. And then Scimitar had another nice war spike up to 350 million, normal highs at 250. We're back down to 200 million at the chart bottom, 207 million for the sellers and less than 190 for the buyers. Yeah, right now I would say if you're looking for that other Tech 2 trade and you want to make your investments now, the logistics cruisers do seem to be pretty interesting. Keep one thing in mind though, sometimes some of these have very bad volumes. Then we've got the Widow that is basically also flat in the 1.1 to 1.2 billion range, kind of confirming that in my opinion, there's nothing too drastic happening with advanced movements. And then we've got the Zealot. Ooh, that does look juicy for potentially a purchase as well. Went up to 300 million ISK, you can see that 280 to 300 million is definitely its high potential, and now we're back down to less than 200 million, 205 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. If you want to, you can definitely try to grab a cheap Zealot as well. It's even a 1 year low point on the chart, which we've not seen in almost 10 months since December. So this does feel like something you could try. Again, that warning though, the volumes in the Zealot are not great. After that, we have our Tech 3 ships coming in at 4320. Like that. Let's see if we can spot anything here. I am expecting some stability at this point, since that Munin spike has happened and everything else seems to be, well, I don't know, Are we in a stalemate in 0-0? Are we currently just, trying to do a little bit of like slow attrition with affordable fleet so that we don't see a massive impact on the market? I think it is possible that that's what's happening at the moment. We're not really, I don't think, seeing too many capital and super capital engagements or anything like that. So perhaps they're still just feeling each other out, and it could still go either way, of course. Then we have as a result, I'm not expecting like, we need 5 jackdaw fleets right now or anything like that. And so the confessor is at 41 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers, right on that 40 million range. And then when it comes with supplies, 12, 10, 10, last 24 hours, less than half a page. This feels very, very reasonable, very doable to be right on the money for its supply demand and the 40 million price. Then the Hecate, all right, that one did just go up to above 50 million ISK, very interesting. 53 million for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers as well. Immediate response from the producers with 127 units trying to be sold at 53 million, showing that there are investors, reserves out there that try to take advantage of these moves. This should mean that we will not go up to like 60, 70, 80 million or anything like that, but this could create a first ripple in that 40 million stability region that I usually see for these destroyers. So potentially, I mean, confessors, it's already not that much. What are we gonna produce in the upcoming weeks? Probably more Hecates. So you could say that I am expecting the confessor to go up a little bit. Unfortunately, 36.5 is probably a little bit too high to jump into. Then we've got the jackdaw that is slowly stabilizing at that 40 million range, 41 for the sellers, 37 for the buyers. We have a little bit of selling as well happening here. Last 24 hours, full page, at least some numbers here as well. So I would be honest, if you want to take advantage of a potential slight wave, because this is getting plugged with supply very quickly, keep an eye on the jackdaw and hope that this supply will eventually mean that we eke out a couple more of these buyers. It's a lot of them that are still well above 36 million. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I would have hoped that perhaps like 35 million or below that could come into range. Then you could have some good purchases. If you want to absolutely do something right now with that Hecate jump in price, I would say buy a jackdaw through the buy prices. And then finally we get this Vapel that is stabilizing. It is the least popular one, so it's staying away from that 40 million range, although sellers almost 40 million, buyers at 33 million, and being the least popular one, being the worst price. You can see that reflected in supplies. It's still decent in numbers. There's some speculators out there for sure, but fresh production doesn't seem to be coming online for this Vapel just yet. Is this a buy opportunity? Well, the Hecate is gonna draw some more supplies there again. But there's enough jackdaws. Confessor, kind of tight. It's difficult. I don't think I'm expecting very big moves anytime soon based on what just happened in the Hecate. It's going to be a little bit of a ripple rather than a big wave, I think. Then we've got our cruisers. Here is the Legion that is getting away from its bottom but still trading very low. 143 million for the sellers, 128 million for the buyers. Buying below 130 I think makes a lot of sense. Loki is also trying to get away from the bottom range. 163 million for the sellers, 148 million for the buyers. Buying below 150 I think also is very affordable. And then the Proteus also going back up a little bit. That's interesting. 162 million for the sellers, 141 for the buyers, is away from the bottom. Very affordable, basically coming in line with all the others as well. And then finally we've got the Tengu that had a little bit of a drop off here and is currently going for 163 million. So sellers are seeing some pressure from new supplies. 147 million for the buyers. Yeah, I would look into, you know, if you don't have one, buying a Legion or a Loki. That does make sense, but I'm not gambling with more than one in the cruiser market because I feel like this could get manipulated to hell and back very easily. The volumes just aren't high enough for a healthy market interaction, I feel like, with the destroyers. And then for the extra product, I am going to choose the Slicer Navy issue because that's for the proving ground that's happening at the moment. So that should be frigates, that should be faction frigates, Navy, and we should find some sort of Imperial Navy Slicer if I'm not mistaken. And so here we do have that effect from the proving grounds. As I said at the beginning of the video, we now know that the next ones are going to involve, well, rookie ships, so not really a big market opportunity there. Then we have battle cruisers, so that could definitely move the market a little bit if it's popular enough. I do think that here CCP is trying to look for the upper boundary in cost to popularity. And then we had, well, a mixed bag, right? We've got Caldari ships, frigates and destroyers, quite a few types there. That one could actually be interesting still for traders, industrialists, things like that. It's the furthest one out if I'm not mistaken. It's different, it's different types of ships there. There could still be some opportunity, and this is basically the showcase of that. Normally 10 million, 12.5 million at the higher end of the trade for the Imperial Navy Slicer. Right now it's selling for 13.7 million, which is not that much of a premium. 10 million for the buyers, which is still quite reasonable, but it is of course the volumes that make this impressive, and the high points, 17.5, 20 million. So this is where opportunity is bred. You can basically know that in some of these volumes people have sold these Imperial Navy Slicers for 15 million and up as well, and done so pretty easily because of that massive increase in interest of the ship. So there is no doubt in my mind that the proving grounds will constantly show their impact on the market. And so the release dates, when CCP actually comes out with information, are of course also potentially really nice for opportunities. And yeah, we've got the next 3 if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, make your gambles, I would say. The potential, I think, is shown that it is there. And that is going to be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.